Hi, I'm Ed Wilkinson, and welcome to On the Block. Today we're on Staten Island. I'm here at Our Lady Star of the Sea Parish, and we're talking with Father Tom Devery. Father, good to see you.
Good to see you.
So you've been here on Staten Island for a few years now, huh?
I came to Staten Island in 2000. I was the pastor at Holy Child Parish, and then I did a stint living on Staten Island at Monsignor Farrell High School, but then working in the priest personnel office in Manhattan. Mm-hmm. And now I came here to the parish here in July of 2014.
Yeah. So this looks like, I mean, this is an urban parish, but it's really kind of like suburbia out here, isn't it?
Well, we have more space, yeah. There's a lot of space.
And it's a beautiful church. Tell us about that church. Yeah.
The church at one time seated about 500 people, and I guess it was only built in the 80s because the church before that was a more kind of a little country church. Mm-hmm. And as the area began to grow, and really when they knew that in 1983 or 84, they knew that even then 500-seater wasn't big enough. So they kind of looked at making it 1,100-seater, and in 2010 it was open. And so we have
the stained glass windows are just beautiful. They jump at you,
yes,
right?
Yes, they do. Yeah.
What's the makeup of the parish here in terms of ethnicity?
I would say the number one ethnic group in our parish would be Italian, mm-hmm. and then we have a lot of Irish, a lot of German. We have some Filipinos.
This has got to be one of the last churches built here in the Archdiocese, no?
Well, yes, and actually there's a few more upstate. Mm-hmm. You know, St. Kateri Tekakwitha in LaGrangeville and St. Joseph's in Somers is kind of based on our parish church here.
Now, you mentioned before you came here 2.5 years ago, you had a little stint with the personnel department over in the city, right?
Yes.
So you know something about the numbers of priests, and we hear constantly about a priest shortage. Is there a priest shortage today?
Well, you know what it is? There's an aging out of our priests. We have, when I was ordained in 1977, there were about 1,250 of us. Right now, I think we're up to 600, and maybe even a little bit less. And about 200 of that is over the age of 75.
Wow.
So if we have 296 parishes, we have about 400 priests manning them. So, yeah.
Yeah. So how many parishes do we have in the Archdiocese? You have a lot of parishes here.
We went from, well, we had a downsizing. We went from 409 to 298, I believe, is what we have now.
Mm-hmm. What do we look for in young men who want to be a priest today? I mean, first of all, do you get many young men who come to you and say, gee, Father, I was thinking about becoming a priest?
You know, I think the thing I'm looking for when I see a young person who's thinking about priesthood, do they have a generosity of spirit? Have they got that kind of personality that can be, I call it an inclusive love. They love everybody, and they have an ability to build community and to kind of really want to spread the gospel. They have a deep love for Jesus. And when you see that carried through their family and through their college lives and even into their workplace, there's also a point, it seems to me, that some of the men go through a difficult time in their life where they really had a suffering that they went through, and through that they've come to experience the Lord, and God has become their hero, and now they have I think the credentials to really be an effective priest.
Yeah. So I guess you're talking about some men who would come in later in life. You know, is that more the norm these days than it was in the past?
You know, I would say almost 50-50, because we have 2 men in our parish right now who are studying for priesthood. And one had worked as an engineer for many years, and a good 15 years, I would say. And then one fellow that just graduated from St. John's University and went straight into Douglaston, you know, and both equally dedicated, holy men. They have a great love for the Lord, but different experiences.
Mm-hmm. What do you do here in this parish? You're only here 2.5 years, you said, as the pastor, but what do you do in terms of community building, you know, to make people feel together like they're one big Catholic family here?
Well, I think part of the thing is being out and meeting the people after all the masses, you know, shaking hands and greeting people, getting to know them. There is a Staten Island Council of Churches. We'd be amazed to know that it's about 160 different churches here on Staten Island. So there's a strong ecumenical effort, you know, and we spearheaded back in July Hope Over Heroin March, because as beautiful and as wonderful as the neighborhood is, our biggest challenge right now is the increased use of heroin among our young people and the tragic number of people who are overdosing. So life is worth living, and we're trying to come up with ways to get the gospel message and to help our young people stay focused in the Lord.
So many young people just don't have anything right now, in terms of they don't have work. They just seem to flounder when they get to the college years. What can we do as a church to try to stay in touch with those people?
I think young people need a challenge. I think young people really need to get outside themselves and see something much bigger and greater than themselves. I'm very impressed with the college groups of people who do missionary work, and they go to third world countries, and they see the perspective of, we have so much in comparison. So I'm very, very encouraged when I discover folks that have done that. I think there could be a lot of insular, people just don't even leave the island or don't get involved in too much, and that's where problems happen, when they get too self-absorbed.
I want to take you back to your very first assignment after ordination, and you were assigned to a parish at West Point, right?
That's right.
I mean, that's a unique kind of parish.
It was. Well, I tell you, it was in a unique time when I got up there. I went to West Point in '77, and there had been a cheating scandal in '76. And my predecessor was pretty vocal about the honor code and how the honor code, in a sense, was breached. There were more people that tolerated cheating that had gone on. And so when he was asked to leave and move on, then when my class came up for ordination, I was the one selected to go and work there. So I was completely surprised. Also, the first class of women was coming through the academy at that time. So they had the cheating scandal, they had the class of women, and they had me. So. Yeah.
Now, is that a parish that's right on the grounds of the academy, or is it's right there?
Yeah, the Catholic chapel, it's named after the Most Holy Trinity, was built around the year 1900. And so the decision from the Archdiocese of New York, which was also the military ordinariate at that time, was that our priests would staff that. And we did until 1999. And then in 2000, it became a part of the military archdiocese.
Yeah. What kind of a response did you get from the cadets up there? Were many of them Catholic, or what percentage were Catholic?
There were a tremendous number. I would say nationally we're about 30% Catholic. And I'd say at West Point, it was a little bit higher, 35, and in some cases, certainly among the women at the academy, almost 40% Catholic. And the great joy that I had as a young priest was we had Mass every morning at 6:20, and there would be close to 200 cadets at Mass every day.
Do you stay in touch with some of those people?
Sure, yeah.
You have any stories that you could tell us about?
Oh my gosh, I could name names and stories. I did a lot of weddings. I averaged between 60 and 65 couples, and then years later, when they were having children, I went to visit them and stuff, and a number of them are retired in beautiful places like Hawaii or, all over. And we do keep in touch, Christmas time, and a lot of folks come through New York at some point, so it's good to keep up in touch with them.
Yeah. What kind of parish programs would you have, say, up there at West Point?
The big thing that was happening at West Point in my time was Worldwide Marriage Encounter was very big. The Cursillo community was very big. Programs, Troops Encounter Christ. And then we had a number of cadets who even worked in prison ministry, Residents Encounter Christ. So the follow-up of them, RCIA was very big. It had just started when I got there. And so there were a lot of family activities. We did pre-Cana in the homes of the officers, and that was very exciting because you get 5 or 6 couples coming through, and then we saved a lot of marriages. Many of them realized they were not ready for the commitment. So many chose not to marry. So,
sure, that's a big commitment, and of course, commitment to the priesthood is another huge commitment. We're going to talk about your own commitment and how you came to arrive at that when we come back. But right now, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back with Father Tom Devery. Welcome back to On the Block. I'm Ed Wilkinson. I'm sitting here today with Father Tom Devery here on Staten Island at Our Lady Star of the Sea Parish. You grew up in the South Bronx, which quite a difference from the area that you live in now.
Oh, indeed.
Did you grow up in a typical Catholic family?
I did. My mother and father were Irish immigrants. My dad worked for the A&P warehouse, and I lived in St. Luke's Parish, and we were trained by the Blauvelt Dominican Sisters and the Sacred Heart Brothers. They were great people. And I lived in a turbulent time because it was the beginning of the major racial tension that was happening in the city at the time. You had your Irish and your Italian versus the blacks and the Puerto Ricans. And so we saw a lot of that happening, and a lot of people moved out of the neighborhood up to Fordham Road and Tolentine, which we did when I graduated in 8th grade. And so it was, and yet in the parish, we were all one. You know, it was wonderful things about the leadership that we had in our community, that the church really kind of, we were all treated as brothers and sisters in the Lord. So
you went to Cardinal Hayes High School.
I'm a classmate of Cardinal Hayes, yeah.
When did you start thinking about priesthood? You didn't go into the prep seminary.
No.
So did priesthood ever dawn on you while you were in grammar school? Or
Oh, it did. And you know, I went to the local pastor and I said, I'm thinking about becoming a seminarian. Should I go? No, he says, no. He says, go to a regular high school, go to dances and football games. If God really wants you, he'll work through all that. And so I was very glad I went to Cardinal Hayes, had a great education. We had 4 or 5 different orders of brothers, and for a while I was kind of looking at them. But it was actually the moment when I started to work in the A&P. And I was kind of shy and nervous, and I did not want to be a cashier. And one day, this woman who was training me to be a cashier said to me, you know, she said, keep an eye on this woman, will you, hon? So I did, and I checked her out, and she said, well, what did she buy? I said, she bought a quart of milk and about $4 or $5 worth of cat food. She said, say a prayer for her, hon, will you? She's living off cat food.
Oh, jeez.
And that was the first time I really felt compassion for somebody and really began to pray. I'd see her nearly every day or every other day. But it was that realized that I couldn't do what I wanted to do for her, and that just kind of sparked. And then the night that Dr. Martin Luther King got shot, that was an amazing moment. A race riot broke out. We were at 176th Street and Jerome Avenue, and there's a train platform there. And I remember being up on the platform, hearing all the breaking of glass and looting going on, and yelling at God and saying, why does there have to be such you know, violence in the world? You know, I just turned 17. Why does there have to be a war in Vietnam? Why is this all happening now? Dr. Martin Luther King was our hope for peace. And I heard the Lord say to me, well, do something about it. Be my priest. I said, Lord, I don't want to be a priest. You know, I have a girlfriend, and she already has our children named. I mean, you know, how would I tell her? He says, but I'll make you happy. And it was this kind of like a monologue. I felt it in my heart. And then I would say maybe about 5 or 6 weeks later, Parade magazine, the Daily News, had a color spread of Cathedral College in Douglaston.
I remember that.
You remember that?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And that attracted me, and that's why I applied to seminary.
Wow, that's incredible. Because those were very turbulent times. You mentioned King, of course, in the Vietnam War, but Robert Kennedy being assassinated, the conventions in '68 were riots, and you know, our own riots here in New York City. So I mean, that does affect you in some way, I guess.
Oh, it does. And you know what it was? You knew there had to be a better way.
Yeah.
You knew that there were people who of great will who could, you know, were dedicating their lives to trying to make things better. And it just seemed that, you know, was anything ever going to come good from all this?
Yeah. So what did you do then when you said, okay, I'm going to give it a shot,
I'm going to give it a shot and see what happens. If it's meant for me, fine. If not. And then when I got out there, I realized it was a place of prayer. It was a place where I met other normal guys just like myself who were thinking about priesthood. And it was a wonderful place to experience your talents. We had 2 fellows that lived at the end of our corridor who went on to become great, tremendous people in Broadway, Andrew Lloyd Webber and Tim Rice. So to be a part of Joseph and his amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, to be in one of the apostles in Superstar was a thrill. You know, that was another whole world that opened up for me to see that.
That was the first production of Joseph and his Technicolor Dreamcoat, right? Right there on the Douglaston campus.
That's
and you were in that? What was that experience like?
It was wonderful because it was, and for the most part, it was an oratorio that was put on by the seminarians, but we had the boys from and girls from St. Pancras in Glendale, Queens. They joined us as well. And then when we had other great productions, Charlie Matanti and Father Charlie Matanti and Father Harold Buckley, they were tremendous in helping us to realize not only just the theater piece of it, but the Christological piece. You know, how Jesus is involved in each of these characters. And so we grew a lot. And we became confident in ourselves.
Andrew Lloyd Webber was at the opening performance, was he?
He was there, yeah, and you wouldn't give him a second look. I mean, he was only maybe 2 or 3 years older than ourselves, you know. Little did you realize someday he'd be Sir Andrew.
So you got through Douglaston. I mean, there has to be a time though when you're saying, you know, you question yourself. Is this right for me? You know, What were those 4 years like? It sounded like they were pretty happy and productive and creative for you.
They were happy and productive, but you know, one of the things that you realize that you long for more than anything else is to be a family man and have children and have a family. So when you saw some of your best friends leave and move on and get married, it's sort of like you had to really question your own vocation over and over again. And that was tough, you know. And it's ironic because years later, after having been on the parish mission team and moving around, didn't I bump into my first girlfriend? And
was she happily married?
She was happily married. She had her child. She never named them the ones that we were going to name them. But it was one of these things where I was so happy for her and she was happy for me. So I just realized God was good. But yeah, you go through all those soul-searching moments when you have to let go.
And then you graduate from college and you have to make another big decision. Then do you go on to the Theology or not?
That's right.
And you would, being a priest of New York, you would go on to St. Joseph's in Dunwoody, right? So was that a tough decision for you at that point?
It was in that, you know, it was a much more serious step. You know, we were all dressed in black all day long, and then going into apostolates, which were a little bit more serious than what we did at Douglaston. And there was an excitement to it too, because you know you were getting closer and closer to ordination. You watched and lived with the men in the house, and you saw them do their transition from leaving the seminary into parish life, and how happy they were. So that enthusiasm grew. Yeah.
But still, when you're beginning, you know, it's another 4 years away. And that can seem like an eternity at that point, right?
You know, and you know, it's funny because you were tired of academics. It's sort of like, I was not the smartest one in my class by any, but I was, you plugged through and you got through it, and we helped one another. I think the sense of humor and the men that I had in the house with me were tremendous. Yeah.
Some men enjoy the experience of seminary life, some don't.
That's right.
Where do you fall on that?
I probably would say it got harder toward the end until I finally got to ordination. And then, you know, we were sent out as deacons. So the night that we were ordained deacons was December 18th, 1976. I found out that I was going to be on for midnight mass at St. Pat's Cathedral.
Wow.
So I went down to the cathedral for midnight mass, and who's in the sacristy? Just myself and Archbishop Fulton Sheen.
Oh, gee.
And I said, Bishop Sheen, I had a little red towel and I used to go, friends. Tell me, how can I possibly be as good a preacher as you? And he said, make a holy hour every day for the rest of your life and you'll do better than me. You know, and he gave a beautiful homily that night. But I just remembered just how proud I was to meet him, you know, what a great man.
Was he a saint?
Oh yeah, without a doubt. Yeah.
And then you were ordained by another man who people think was a saint too.
Oh, Cardinal Cook. Cardinal
right?
Cook was wonderful.
What was that day like to be ordained in St. Patrick's Cathedral? How many men were there at that?
There were 11 in my class. And so we all had been sent out into parishes for 11 months. And so each of us were given the gift of 250 tickets for the ordination. So the cathedral was packed. And it was very, very exciting. And my class, I call it the Peter Pan class. Most of us were like 26 when we were getting ordained. And the morning was just a glorious morning. There must have been like 14 bishops and the Cardinal and lots and lots and lots of priests. When the laying on of hands took place, I think it must have lasted about 40 minutes.
Sure.
It was powerful.
It's always a
and that
great
sense,
day.
I felt like, you know, really the sense of the Lord. I was nervous, and then I could hear God say in my heart, let me do this for you. And a peace came over me that was just tremendous.
Wow.
Yeah.
We're going to take another quick break. We're here on Staten Island with Father Tom Devery. Stay with us. We're coming right back. Welcome back to On the Block. I'm Ed. This is Father Tom, and we've been talking about seminary training and ordination day. And I want to talk about one of the great assignments that you had as part of a parish mission team. Well, it's larger than that, a mission team in the Archdiocese. Something rather unique. What was that all about?
Oh, sure. It got started around shortly after my ordination time. My homiletics professor had a vision of trying to revive the parish mission band, which were just priests. But this time he wanted to include lay people and religious and priests who would live in community, make a commitment for 1 year at a time, and travel from parish to parish as we were invited. And by the time I got on the team, I had just finished working in the vocation office. I was invited on, and we were in a very large 59-room mother house for nuns. So there was the men's section and the women's section, and We gathered for prayer every day. We, we had house chores to take care of. But then we went into the parishes Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. We were there Saturday, Sunday, and preached at all the masses. But we would do school presentations with talking to puppets and clowns and skits. We had home visits to the homebound after lunch, a noonday mass every day, obviously. And then the mission experience itself was an hour and a half. And in music and in word and in storytelling primarily, we drove home the themes of God's love for us, our response to God's love, forgiveness and reconciliation, and unity and healing. And no matter what kind of a day we had, whether it was a good day or a tough day or a challenging day or difficulty among ourselves, the Holy Spirit was present in that mission hour. And the powerhouse was the people that prayed that were homebound for us.
Yeah. And so these were priests and lay people working together and then living together in community.
Yeah.
You know, how does that's got to be a challenge to live in a community like that with.
Well, it was wonderful because especially if you had to try to get a consensus on things, it was difficult. But a little trick to the trade was this: we had on Thursday after prayer consciousness raising, which meant you could bring up anything that you got on my nerves because of this. And it was like a chapter of faults, you know. And so I realized, early on that I monopolized conversations at dinner time. Would you please shut up so we can get a word in edgewise? Please forgive, you're forgiven. Or I made a decision on behalf of the team and had not consulted them. Whoa, I got what for? So there was the reality of that please forgive me aspect. And we really genuinely loved one another. And then if a team member came up and said, that was a great homily, you were in the zone today. Boy, you really felt affirmed.
Yeah.
So it was good.
Does that program still exist today?
No. In fact, we're kind of reviving the spirit of it for the parish cluster missions for the next couple of years, called Renew and Revive. And so the Archdiocese is seeking to kind of stir up through the mission experience because it was a valid time. But then again, like everything else, times change. People had to move on. But we existed, I think, when it all ended, we had 770 missions. There were 70 members of the team, and we had 7 pilgrimages.
Wow.
So that was the Lord's work.
Do you stay in touch with some of those lay people?
Oh, yeah.
And well, you must have had a little bit of a help, though, since you had the seminary communal living experience.
Yes.
So that must have helped you a little bit living in community here with these other people.
It was good. We had the seminary community, and then religious women were wonderful because they had their experience of community. You had married couples that came on board, and having raised families. Then you had a lot of young people who were single, and then this is all new to them in a sense. So in getting along with one another, we really had a lot of gifts, a lot of talent. So there had to be a generosity of spirit. If a person was discerning to come on the team, we had to see if they could really hang.
Yeah. What do you do in your own free time when you want to just unwind or get away from the rectory?
Oh my gosh!
You've got to have some hobbies.
I do. One of my little places that I love. I have about 7 couples that I married from the military that live in Hawaii. And I love going to Hawaii.
Isn't that convenient?
Oh, very, very good. Well, I brought a friend there one time, and the response was, there's parts of me unclenching that haven't unclenched all year. I enjoy going back to West Point. One of my cadet friends is now the pastor at West Point. So I love going back there. And now the big thing on campus is focus missioners, to watch how that evangelization effort is taking great strides. So I'm really proud of what's happening up at the Military Academy, and Army beat Navy, so we're, the Lord is good.
Finally.
Yeah, and a bowl game as well, so this was a good year.
Yeah. There must be some similarities between seminary living and the living that the people do up at the academy there, right? There are certain qualities that would overlap.
First of all, there's discipline, but also the idea of inspirational leadership. One of the things I saw happening erode over time was the letting go of the hazing that used to take place, and the negative reinforcement. That became more positive training, and so I realized just the quantum leap of a kind of leader that the military is. And I see particularly in the Army how they hail and farewell one another, when there's a transition in power. And so I'm very much aware of that, and certainly love to see that more with our own priests being welcomed and received into parishes.
Sure. Yeah. There seems to be a greater appreciation today for the military and the people that go into that kind of service. Oh, yeah. During when we grew up in the 60s, a lot of the military were looked down upon.
That's right.
That's changed a lot, hasn't it?
Oh, yeah. It's changed an awful lot, but it's also, you know, there's an awful lot that is commensurate with their training that will help them in the next world, in the next phase of their lives. So, for example, all the stuff that's going on with cybersecurity, that's very, very big, hot button topic. A lot of the digitation and electronic training and engineering that's going on right now, the military's right up there. And then, as a young person, being able to be exposed to so many great minds early on and move around the country and be given a lot of authority and power, you get to see a lot of greatness come out of these young people.
Sure. So people come to you and they want to go into religious life, particularly a young man who wants to become a priest. What do you say to them?
First of all, what is your relationship like with Jesus? What is your prayer life like? I would ask them, why priesthood? What was it like growing up in your family? I would ask them, most especially, has there ever been a point in your life when you felt powerless? You know, and when was the Lord the hero in your life? I would ask them if they ever thought about being married and being a family man. That's extremely important. You know,
Why do you say that?
Because I think you're going to be the leader of a lot of families. And you're going to hear things and you're going to be preparing people for the sacrament of marriage. But also as a compassionate person in confession, you want to be able to shape and help and form people into a newness of life, to learn the art of forgiveness. You know, we just had the death of Detective Steve McDonald. He was such an apostle for forgiveness. And I think that's the huge key in parish life that's needed today more and more. If we can get over our past and really trust in the Lord to give us His gifts, life takes off.
Well, Tom, thanks so much.
You're very welcome.
Enjoyed talking with you today. We've been
pleasure.
on Staten Island here talking with Father Tom Devery. I'm Ed Wilkinson for On the Block. Join us again next week.